Hello, you delightful individuals, and welcome back to the wonderful world of thirst and vanity. It is, after all, the home of hedonism, and what more hedonistic than a little bit of nostalgia and some suspicious activity. Yesterday, friends, we're going to be jumping into the world of, of my youth. The world of Pokémon. Yes, friends, I grew up on Pokémon back in the day. The proverbial day, that is, of course. I grew up with Pokémon Red back when there was only 2 games and there were only 151 Pokémon. Yes, Mew technically counted. And do you know what? I loved it. I absolutely indulged in it. It satisfied so many of my gaming needs when I was a plucky young whippersnapper. I do have to say that since that point, I kind of gave up on it. Like, I did Pokemon Red. That was all fine and dandy. I traded with my friend who had Pokemon Blue. Oh, it was very exciting. A bonding activity between me and them. But after that, I checked out. And it wasn't that I wasn't interested in Pokemon as a whole. Pokemon as a world really fascinated me as a plucky young happy-go-lucky scamp. It was the fact that the immersion was broken for me. When they brought around Pokemon Gold and Silver, I was like, oh, fantastic, interesting. And then they were like, oh, by the way, there's another 150 Pokemon. And I was like, what? But where did they come from? Like, this was the world where there was 150 Pokemon and the secret 151. Mew. Oh, how interesting. But where did the others come from? Spontaneously appearing out of nowhere, the Pokemon world grew double. It literally doubled overnight. Supposedly, you know? And there were new evolutionary states of, like, the child version of Pikachu, the Pichu, and stuff like that. And it melted my little mind. I just couldn't get into it because the immersion of the idea of the Pokemon world was broken to me, you know? And I know that there's going to be a lot of fans of Pokemon that are going to be very upset by my abandoning of the brand, abandonment of the series, as there are a lot of fans out there, a lot of people that thoroughly enjoy Pokemon. It's the nostalgia for them, and also current day, they enjoy the atmosphere, they enjoy the environment, they enjoy the pocket monsters, as it were. And I genuinely love that for you. I love the fact that you are able to embrace it. And you know what? I am as well, to a certain degree. There's certain elements of nostalgia that I still feel when I see other people play Pokemon, or during the pandemic when they really brought around all of the Pokemon Go elements. I enjoyed that. It was good fun. It was a laugh, but I couldn't immerse myself in it because there was loads of Pokemon that I just didn't know anymore. They were completely lost to me. They went so far over my head, they were in orbit. But regardless of that, I still know Pokemon. I know Pokemon. I understand the world. I understand the dynamics. And recently, there has been some news about the world of Pokemon, or more specifically about the developers of Pokemon, Game Freak. Now, I know many people think that Nintendo own Pokemon and what have you, but the actual developers are a company called Game Freak, and a few weeks ago, there was a big leak from Game Freak. Game Freak were apparently hacked, and a whole load of information was leaked out into the wonderful world of the internet. And that data included new Pokemon, new evolution states and evolutionary methods, new mini-games for new Pokemon games that are going to be coming out in the future. There was a whole load of tech information that people that are far more intelligent than I and far more tech savvy will probably understand, because clueless, absolutely clueless, you know? And unfortunately, there was a whole load of information around the staff, around the employees of Game Freak that was also leaked into the internet. And as somebody who is in the public eye and is in the world of content creation, I understand how terrifying that is, to have your personal information leaked out to the internet. Even if you're not in the public eye, the idea that you don't have control over your own confidential information is terrifying. It's a very, very scary situation to be in, because you don't know what kind of people are out there and you don't know what they're going to do with that information. So my heart genuinely really goes out to all of those employees that are in that position. And I genuinely hope with all of my heart that nothing comes out of it, and that you can just continue on your lives without any issues or fears around that, you know? However, among all of the data that was leaked out onto the internet, there was one that caught people's attention. A story, a tale a historical fable that was released to the world. And this caught the attention of a great many people. Now, it has to be said that it does seem that this bit of lore, this tasty little tantalizing bit of lore, has been scrapped, or at the very least hasn't come into any Pokemon games so far. And it was meant to be a historical fable in the same way that, like, our myths and legends from ancient civilizations, the Romans, the Egyptians, the ancient Greeks, all of these like cultures had their own myths and legends, and this story was meant to be like a myth/legend within the world of Pokemon. So what I want to do is I want to talk about the story itself, what the story encompassed. I want to talk about how that relates to the world of Pokemon and, of course, the world that we live in itself. And then I want to talk about the reactions that the fans of Pokemon, the Poke fans, how the Poke fans have reacted to this tidbit of information being leaked into the internet, you know? So, the story itself. The story begins with a little preset of long ago, when humans and Pokemon were far more alike. Which immediately is, it's the way that many tales begin, it has to be said, but immediately starts making me like, okay, so Pokemon and humans are on an even playing field. Like, are we talking socially, culturally, evolutionarily? It's not entirely clear. But within the tale, a young girl gets lost in the woods. While out in the woods, she finds a man bathing and asks for help. The man says that there is a cave nearby where they can take shelter and that he will look after her while they are there. A very generous thing for a PG-style game where nothing suspicious can happen. Right? Right? Well, it turns out, no, that's not what happens. Basically, he stays in the cave and she expresses that she wants to leave, and suddenly he brainwashes her in some mystical and magical way into saying that you are not allowed to leave under any circumstances, and all of the people that you were worried about in your hometown are suddenly, like, gone from your memory. It's completely peculiar and mystical and the sort of thing that you would see in the tales of old, you know? But one of the rules that the man has is that under no circumstances is the girl allowed to look at the man while they're sleeping. So when they're in slumber or what have you, when she wakes up, she has to keep her eyes averted from the man so as not to see him while he slumbers. That's like one of the primary rules, you know? And it turns out that the man is indeed a Pokemon, as many of you were probably guessing by this point. The man is a shape-shifting Pokemon, very specifically a Typhlosion. This Typhlosion, for some reason, is able to shapeshift into the form of a human, and that is the reason why he doesn't want to be seen when he's sleeping, because then she will know that he is actually a Pokemon and not a person, not a human being. However, after being brainwashed, she doesn't seem to really care. In fact, she lives very happily with the Typhlosion in his humanoid form, and one day she wakes up with a baby. Yeah, that's where I think the internet has gone, what the fuck? Because spontaneously they wake up with a baby. They're just a few days later they have a baby. There's no mention of any suspicious business going on in the tale itself. There's no talk about suspicious business. There's no talk about the rumpy pumpy bumping uglies. There's no even talk about her being pregnant or anything like that. It's just she wakes up one day with a baby. There are other rules that she has to follow while she's out there in regards to only breaking branches for their fire from the top of trees because they don't want to be tracked by the local villagers and stuff like that. And then it skips ahead a little bit and it's like, okay, that evidently happens. The father of the young girl, who is like, hey, where's my daughter? She went missing in the woods. It's dangerous out there. I'm going to go find her. Comes looking for her. The Typhlosion is like, hey, I'm going to kill your dad. Suddenly the girl remembers everything that she's ever forgotten and is like, no, please don't kill my dad. That's really bad. I don't want you to do that. And the Typhlosion doesn't seem to care. Goes out. Off to kill said father. Turns out that the Typhlosion loses the battle and is murdered by the father. The dad murders the Bakufun, which is the original name for the Typhlosion, and brings his daughter and his half-Pokemon grandchild back to the village. The village themselves treat the girl as an outcast. She's not allowed to live within the village. She has to live on the outskirts and treat her child as a freak of nature. How dare it be a half Pokemon, half human? That's outrageous. That's preposterous. They throw stones at it. They try and cover it with furs, and there's a whole thing about like the more that they cover it with fur, the more likely it is to turn into a Pokemon. And there's panic with the young woman and all that jazz. There's a lot of things that go on in that sort of element. And from what I've read, I don't know whether I've read the full thing or not. I did try and find a whole load of different ones. I tried to find different sources to see if I could get the full script. But from what I've read, it was very much skipped ahead. This thing happened, then this thing happened, then this thing happened, and time was not really well spaced. So I don't know how long she was in captivity. I don't know how long it took for the Pokemon baby to be born. I don't know how long it took for the father to find the young girl, whether it was years or months. But I did try and find it, and I couldn't really find anything out there that had these details. And in that respect, there was nothing explicit in what I read. There was no it wasn't like Rule 34 style Pokemon porn in literary form. It was very much here's a story and she's got a baby. They must have had sex. They must have had some description of Pokemon, and that's kind of it. That's kind of the whole thing. The audacity of there being a Pokemon and human intercourse interaction. Oh my lordy, the scandal. Pokemon are meant to be animals, are they not? But this one can shapeshift. Is it a mythical animal? Who knows? Like I said, I did desperately try to find out whether there was anything more to it, whether there was like an X-rated version of it, and the one that was out on the internet was just sort of like the safe for work version for articles and what have you, but I couldn't really find anything. And I looked all over the place. They say that curiosity killed the cat. Well, curiosity made my search history real questionable, However, the implication was still there. There was a child from a Pokemon and a human. Boom, bestiality. And then, naturally, suspicions were immediately raised about the relationship between Ash's mum and Mr. Mime.
Hey, Mr. Mime. You wanna fuck?
Mr. Mime!
So that's the story. That's the whole story side of things. Is the TLDR of the story. I'm sure it's available on the internet should you really want to go and look at it. But it definitely reads like a myth that you would find in a game. It doesn't read like one of the devs / original writers has gone and created a smut version of the world that they have created. So have that in context, Now, it has to be said, there have always been porn parodies since the beginning of pornography regarding humans and non-human entities. Naturally, we have Rule 34, which by definition is an internet meme which claims that internet pornography exists concerning every possible topic. The concept is commonly depicted as fan art of normally non-erotic subjects engaging in sexual activity. It can also include writings, animations, images, GIFs, and any other form of media which the internet provides opportunities for proliferation and redistribution. Okay? We now know this is Rule 34, okay? Just in case you weren't aware of what Rule 34 meant, this is Rule 34. On top of Rule 34, we also have furries. As always, just to remind everybody that just because somebody is a furry does not mean that it's a sexual thing. People can be furries and not sexual about furries. However, furries can have the kink of being a furry or being into furries. They can have both. They can also be completely separate. Please don't think that just because somebody's in a big fursuit that they are suddenly getting aroused by being in that fursuit or seeing other people in fursuits. That is not the way it always is by any stretch of the imagination. They are different elements. You can be really into furry pornography, but it is not a part and parcel of being a furry, okay? That being said, there is a lot of furry porn out there, and there are furries that indulge themselves in their fursona's desires, as it were, Now, as somebody who's delved into the world of not safe for work things, I can't tell you how much media, hentai, cartoons and games there are out there that include anthropomorphized animals, or worse, animated versions of actual animals. Yes, if there is the ability to report them, I do so. Bestiality is illegal and immoral, and therefore, should there be a not safe for work game that includes it, I report it to the platform as soon as I possibly can. And let's not forget that Pokémon is no exception to this. I mean, there's this pornography.
What's happening? Dika?
Yeah. That is supposedly Pikachu. And Pikachu, Ash, and Misty have, well, a more intimate relationship than is shown anywhere else, shall we say. You know, it exists. It's a thing. Rule 34, literally, yeah. Okay, you get the idea. You get the picture. We're good, right? So the idea of Pokemon being involved in not safe for work content is not an unusual thing. It has been going around since Pokemon pretty much started, okay? I think a lot of the scandal that came with this is the fact that this tale that had blurred lines as to the relationship between a human and a Pokemon came from the dev team themselves. Now, if any of you know anything about the animation world, the animators, well, whether it be from media or for games or what have you, a lot of animators have to sign contracts saying that they will not create not safe for work or explicit materials around the characters that they make for the game company, for the media company, for a well-known animation studio that has an awful lot of very depictable characters that a lot of people fantasize around. So the fact that a story like this that had certain implications came from the original dev team, even if it was scrapped, was quite surprising to people, I think. Now, bestiality, which is what this is, if we're completely honest about this, is not unusual when it comes down to myths and legends, and that is what this story was. It was meant to be a myth within the world of Pokemon. There's a lot of stories of gods or humans turning into animals within our own mythology. There is a lot of stories of humans having sex with animals and creating monsters. For example, the Minotaur or the Minotaur. That was a story where the Queen of Minos was hypnotized or made to have sex with a bull on the behest of a god in order to punish the King of Minos for being, well, heretical, to say the least. As per usual, women being punished because their husbands are dickheads is a recurring thing throughout a lot of history, you know? And this element of myths and legends, the bestiality element of myths and legends, is not only from one, like, culture or region of the world. You've got the Greeks, the Hindus, the Norse, the Japanese. There are so many different myths and legends from so many different cultures that all include the same sort of thing. Taking a couple of examples there, the classic one is Zeus turning into a swan and having sex with a lady. I'm pretty sure he turns into a horse at one point and has sex with a lady. Zeus was well known for turning into animals and having sex with women. And you actually see more of that when you look at old, like, Japanese traditions. The art form shunga, which was part art, part sex education in ancient Japanese before they had more dealings with the Western world, was a proud part of Japanese history. And there's a lot of shunga that does involve bestiality, people having sex with dogs or having sex with birds and what have you. Shunga was very quickly squashed by Victorian ideology as we slowly but surely started having more and more dealings with the Japanese. But the fact of the matter is, it was still an element within the history of these cultures and what have you. On top of that, shapeshifting in and of itself is a well-known trope within myths and legends and media as well. Like, shapeshifting has been a well-known thing since the dawn of human imagination.
調子に乗るサービスすぎるこれが失敗のもとじゃ
All in all, if this was meant to be a myth within the world of Pokemon, this isn't actually too far away from what actual myths were like in our realm of existence, you know? Human mythology of our own literal history has covered all of the elements that you would find in this story. And with deeper reading, having looked a little bit further into the story itself, it turns out that the Bakufan, or Typhlosion, is actually based on an actual Japanese myth, or more specifically, a mythical creature known as the Mujina. The Mujina is a badger-like spirit who was often depicted as a shape-shifting yokai, which was a tricksome spirit in Japanese mythology, well known for tricking people, well known for tricking humans, especially humans who were wanderers or got lost within the wilderness, you know? Now, the Mujina themselves were a less common form of yokai in Japanese mythology. They tended to reside further into the mountains and further away from human society. However, the tales from what I have read do tell of lots of deceptions. They were yokai who did enjoy deceiving humans when they stumbled across them, which falls in line with what the Bakufan, or Typhlosion, did to this young girl. So in regards to myths and legends and the kind of genre that myths and legends produce and have created throughout human history, this story fits in really, really well with that entire idea, with all of the things that are going on in there, you know? However, with further investigation, it turns out that an awful lot had been lost in translation. You see, when the game information was leaked from Game Freaks, when all of this information was leaked onto the internet, it was all in the original Japanese, and that Japanese was then translated into English in order to, you know, be more accessible to the Western world. The first post, from my knowledge, from all the reading that I have done, was actually found on 4chan, and it is believed that the translation that was put up on 4chan was auto-translated using some kind of auto-translator, like a Google auto-translator or something like that. Now, we have information from people who speak both Japanese and English that the machine translation of the original tale has lost a lot in the translation. There's a lot of subtleties and conjecture and context that is lost in translating it from the Japanese automatically through machines and what have you over to English for public consumption of the Western world. The supposed writer of this tale was somebody known as Yu Nakatsui, and that person doesn't actually exist. Obviously, someone wrote it, but the person that is credited as the writer, the author of this tale, doesn't actually exist. They are a non-person. And as mentioned, the story itself was actually about a Mujina. So it wasn't about the literal Pokemon Typhlosion, it's just that the Typhlosion was based on a Mujina. And this was a tale about a Mujina, so that's where the connection has come in, you know? And one of the biggest elements of it that I have actually glazed over quite a lot in this one was the young girl title. I didn't really want to go into the dynamics of age and consent and age of consent and the different rules and regulations throughout history, not only in this country, but across the world, because that is a big old can of worms that I really didn't want to get into in this video. But obviously the phrase young girl certainly implies somebody who is very much under the age of 18. However, it has been said that it was more meant to be young woman, so somebody of age that had got lost in the woods, as opposed to an actual child. And then, of course, we have the crux of the story, the bestiality element. The fact that this mythical creature that is a Pokemon is having coital engagement and producing a child with the young woman. Now, the child element of the story is actually supposed to be the moral of the story, a metaphor that means that once you've been touched by the spirit world, you can't go back. The young woman gets lost in the wood, ends up having relations with a Mujina, and then as they have been touched by the spirit world, they cannot fully integrate back into the society that they were once a part of. And that was meant to be the moral of the tale that this Pokemon myth was based around. So, with all this, what do the fans think? Well, it turns out that Pokemon fans, and very specifically fans of the Pokemon Typhlosion, don't really care. They're not fazed by it at all. Some people find it funny. Some people don't really care because it was never really canon. It was like scrapped or it was never implemented into any of the games. And some people look back on our own history and all of the myths and legends around the mixing of beasts and animals, and subsequently could fully understand why it would be included as like a myth or a legend within the Pokemon world. But overall, it's one of those things that seems to have completely and utterly taken over certain parts of the internet. My lord, that's outrageous. And the fans are like, yeah, sure, okay. if you think it's something important, but we don't really care, to be fair. So yeah, that was the outrageous scandal. And realistically speaking, it's not all that bad. When you think about our own myths and legends, when you think about our own history as people, this story doesn't fall outside of the realms of what we ourselves have told in regards to myths and legends of ancient civilizations. And if it was meant to fit within the Pokemon world as an ancient myth, I don't think it would be that outrageous. There's nothing explicit. There's nothing particularly outrageous. There's nothing that crosses the line of that PG sort of category. They don't talk about how the baby was made. They just says there was a child that was there. And overall, I don't think it's anything more than a child would learn about the myths and legends of this day and age, you know? A classic one is like Hercules. People talk about Hercules and the fact that Hercules is the son of Zeus. No one really talks about how. No one questions where Hercules came from and why they are a demigod and not a full god themselves. Everyone just takes it as granted. Yeah, son of Zeus, cool. All fun and games. So I can see where the suspicious nature would come from. I can see why people would question it and naturally where people's minds immediately jump to. But actually, in context, it doesn't really make that much of a difference. Obviously, it isn't one of those stories that's ever going to make the final cut. But at the same time, even if it did, I don't think it's particularly outrageous in regards to mythical context, especially not considering some of the weird ass shit that we humans have done in our own history. Good lord. So there you go, friends. The Pokemon getting Poke wrong. Ugh, I can't believe I just said that. Behold the latest tale of Pokemon. Realistically speaking, this isn't the sort of thing that people should be concentrating on. They should be concentrating on the fact that all of these innocent people have had their confidentiality infringed. You know, like that is a much bigger problem in regards to these leaks. If it had been a hack and a leak that had just included something like this, I don't think it would be that much of a problem. But the fact that they have actually leaked personal information of the employees, that makes it a much bigger issue in my personal opinion, you know? But yeah, let me know what you think, friends. Are you a fan of Pokemon? Are you a fan specifically of Typhlosion? Is this something that would affect you and the way that you play the game? Or is it, like I said, just another one of those scenarios where it's like, yeah, it's a myth and a legend. It really doesn't bother me. Or it's not canon, so it really doesn't matter. Let me know down in the comments. I would really, really appreciate it. Friends, if you would like to find me on other platforms, you can find me on Twitch, twitch.tv/ValenVain, where we play some games, we talk about sex, we talk about deviance and debauchery, we talk about all kinds of different things over there. It's a good place to hang out, and I thoroughly enjoy streaming on there, you know? You can check me out on the old TikToks, where I do whimsical facts about schmecks and a variety of other little tidbits of hedonism in a just over a minute format, you know? Or you can check me out on Instagram, where you find more of the behind the scenes stuff when I do shows and bits and pieces. It's all very interesting and peculiar, and I love it, you know? Behold, the social medias. If you have enjoyed this video, you delightful beans, don't forget to potentially think about clicking that subscribe button. If you're not sure, check out some of my other stuff and then think about doing it. That would always be worthwhile. I don't want people to subscribe to something that they're not going to thoroughly enjoy, you know? And of course, I will see you all next week for another delightful video about hedonism in some way, shape, or form. Until then, friends, don't do anything I wouldn't do, because if I wouldn't do it, it'll fucking kill you.